Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. I want to first start by thanking the SPEAR team. This is a portion of it, but the entire SPEAR team dedicated a considerable amount of time and effort to review a lot of factors related to the discussion today and provide me with their thoughts. I also want to thank my executive team who's represented here, both the detention side and the enforcement side, who have been a big participant in our evaluation, which has gone on since I've taken office on January 1st. After the methodical review, I am shutting down Tent City. This facility is not a crime deterrent. It is not cost efficient, and it is not tough on criminals. That may have been the intent when it was first opened and there was a need. But this facility became more of a circus atmosphere for the general public. Starting today, that circus ends and these tents come down. We're going to give the criminals what they don't want, which is detention inside jails in isolated areas that are more safe for our detention officers. And we're going to give the taxpayers what they do want, which is an organization that runs efficiently. As I was looking back during the review regarding circumstances in the discussion over Tent City, it was described as a concentration camp. It has become a preferred location and a choice by inmates as a priority is where they would like to stay. That undermines and goes against all the things that we've been told for far too long. There is no empirical evidence to show that this facility in any way deters crime. By shutting down Tent City, we will be able to save approximately $4.5 million in our budget that can be used in other ways to benefit our operations and to enhance safety on behalf of the detention officers who work in difficult environments and put their safety on the line every day. I've heard many times discussions regarding the difficult conditions in Tent City during certain times of the year, and I recognize those challenges. But those challenges have had a more severe effect on the detention staff who are in full gear, working difficult long hours and overtime in very trying conditions with difficult dynamics. Number one priority for me is to keep my officers and my deputies safe as they serve this community, to keep a detention center open for the sake of the notoriety of which it's become. It goes against everything I stand for. When I became sheriff, I said I'd run an efficient office where safety, public safety, that of my officers and detention officers, and the best interest of the community would come first. That's why I make this decision with the utmost confidence. For those who are concerned, let me be as crystal clear as I can be. I have 5 other detention centers with plenty of space. No inmates are going free, and if you commit a crime in Maricopa County, you will be incarcerated and detained in our facilities. We have the room. This organization is considerably understaffed, and every day when these officers go to work in environments where 1 or 2 detention officers have to account for 150 to 200 inmates, that is not a healthy or safe environment. They are my priority. By shutting down Tent City, I'll be able to relocate a considerable number of detention officers in areas of need to enhance safety and security. Any argument otherwise is irresponsible and unselfish. And I state that meaning those who want to criticize the purpose behind closing this tent down. I'm going to run a safe organization, and we're going to put the best interests of our employees in this community as the number one priority with every decision. This decision was based off of data. This decision was based off of a comprehensive review by all those standing here with me and many more. When the SPEAR team came forward with their recommendations last week, they directly aligned with the information, the opinion, and the expertise of the men and women in the uniform standing to my left. It was not a surprise, nothing more than a reaffirmation of what we already knew. But we wanted to be fair to the process and be pragmatic. And as I promised, I engaged the community in this effort because they are our partners if we're going to make Maricopa County a safe community and make the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office an efficient, effective law enforcement office. Just going to close by telling you, there is no decision too difficult for me to make when it serves the best interest of this community. I was elected and empowered to do that on your behalf, and I take my responsibility extremely serious. This morning, the first thing that I did was I went to Tent City and visited with my employees there so they'd hear it from me first, because I owe that to them. They're the ones who've made the sacrifices. They're the men and women who made that facility function in a manner against all odds and all challenges. So all the notoriety and exposure that it got merely undermined the efforts and the great work that they were doing. This organization is refocusing to ensure that everyone appreciates what the men and women in uniform and the civilian staff who support them do every day. And I'm not going to allow for nonsense or ineffective practices or wasteful dollars or other issues that we've seen to continue in this organization. And I count on the counsel of not only my own staff, but members of the Spear Board and others to give me good guidance. But I own this decision because it's the right decision. I made it because I'm the sheriff of this office, and I take my responsibility serious, and I take the safety of the men and women who work in this office serious, and the public safety of this community is a #1 priority. That will never change. So thank you for your time. I'm going to turn it over to Grant first or take questions. So I'm going to turn it over to our chair of the Spear Board, Grant Woods. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Sheriff. Thank you for doing this. On behalf of the entire Spear committee, we thank you for reaching out to the community. I can tell you we had a real cross-section of the community. We expect to continue forward here if the sheriff calls upon us on other issues. But our first one that he gave us was Tent City and what to do with it. When I say cross-section, I think you should understand it's a real cross-section. I'm talking about from very conservative people to pretty liberal people. People from leaders in the East Valley to the West, North, South. I mean, we pretty much had it all here. And you should know that our recommendations, our conclusions, everything that you read in our report was unanimous. So I think that that speaks to a number of things, to the commitment of the group here, which I was proud to chair, and also to the subject matter itself. Tent City was started in 1993. The alleged purpose was to meet a surge in inmate population at the jail. Tents had been used sparingly across the country in the past for temporary situations. So it was done here supposedly for that reason. It had the capacity of having 2,100 inmates. It peaked at 1,700 inmates. Today it has, last several years, it's averaged 700 to 800 inmates. So it's gone from 1,700 to less than half. The costs for Tent City stay the same. It costs pretty much the same thing because you've got to supervise the entire area, whether you have 1,700 people or you have half of that. So economically, it's a problem now. Why the reduction? Well, things have changed since 1993 in many ways in our country, and one way is that when we talk about this classification of inmate, judges, probation officers, prosecutors are looking to alternative forms of punishment to incarceration more and more. So remember who's at Tent City. These are misdemeanants. And these are people who have been given probation, and jail is a term of their probation. So they are, by definition, less serious offenders. So you see cities across the valley looking to things like home arrest, electronic monitoring, diversion programs, things like that, which are far less expensive and ultimately get the same job done of protecting the community and still applying some sort of punishment to the defendant. So we don't think the large population surge that we saw in 1993 will return. It's actually going in the other direction. Work furlough is out there right now. We have recommended that work furlough transition to another place as well, but that will be a transition. Work furlough is a great program. It's a good idea, but work furlough used to operate outside of a tent environment back when I started practicing law, and it operates outside a tent environment every place in the United States except here. So they will find somewhere else to house the work furlough program. We also urge the Sheriff's Office to look at alternatives to the government running work furlough programs, be it profit or nonprofit. Other jurisdictions have had success running these sort of programs. We think that's something we should look at. So let me tell you what the most surprising thing to us was, and I think this is very important, and I hope you'll report it, because it's important to our community. I think I can speak for everybody on our committee, the 8 who are here and the 4 who couldn't make it, all 12, and that we were surprised to learn that the inmates felt very strongly that they wanted us to keep Tent City open. To a person. I can tell you, I talked to probably 100 people out there, men and women. They were 100%. I think if you talk to the detention officers, they will tell you, yeah, those people out there like it. They want to be there. They're there by choice, pretty much, by the way. If they don't want to be there, they don't have to be there. They can say, I don't want to be here anymore, and they'll be put back in a regular jail. What does that tell you? It tells you that this negative image that we've gotten since 1993, that we are so tough on prisoners in Maricopa County, that this is how we treat them, that was false. So we kind of got this is the good news and the bad news. The good news is we weren't guilty of that. They have an environment there that they choose to be in and think it's okay, and they prefer it to the alternative of being cooped up 23 hours a day. The bad news is the rest of the country thinks that we're that sort of person who would abuse and humiliate and prisoners and put them in such harsh situations. Now, we did go see them and do our visits in the cooler months here, but speaking for myself, I talked to them about the extremes and cold nights and, more importantly, the summers, and many of them had gone through them, and they choose to be outdoors, which I think many of us would, rather than being cooped up indoors. But speaking for myself, I don't really care what they think. That was a very small factor, except perhaps the Sheriff's Office can look at that when they look at our incarceration methods in the future. But we're not here to do necessarily what the inmates want. We're here to do what's best for Maricopa County. If the inmates voted, I'm telling you it would be in the high 90 percentile, if not 100%. They would like for it to stay open, which is exactly the opposite of the image that's been portrayed. Having said that, the days of Arizona being a place, I hope, where people are humiliated or embarrassed or abused or ridiculed for the self-aggrandizement of any body or anything are over. They had no place in our community. They didn't reflect our community. And we're moving on. This jail, this office, and hopefully our whole governmental structure is going to more accurately reflect the people of this community, which are much better than that. So those days are over, and that message should go out. And thank you to the sheriff for taking such quick action and announcing today he's going to shut down Tent City. So let me just read you our conclusion. It's one paragraph. Again, this is all unanimous. As the old legal maxim states, when the reason for the rule ceases, the rule itself should cease to exist. Tent City was established to fill the demand for quick and inexpensive beds. Attitudes toward incarceration for many crimes have changed since 1993. By closing Tent City, needed money can be saved by moving all of the prisoners to other MCSO jails. The work furlough program will not suffer from the closure. Significant money will likely be saved by a better use of staff and hopefully a significant reduction in overtime. Given that the reason for the creation of Tent City has ceased, we recommend that Tent City be closed and its inmates transition back into the rest of the county jail system. There will be a transition period necessary, but there is no reason this change cannot now be enacted and implemented with proper planning. Okay. Thank you. And we're going to, Lydia Guzman from our committee is now going to read that last conclusion in Spanish for you, and she'll be available, as will I, and the rest of the members when we're done here. Lydia?
Lo que voy a hacer en este momento es de que voy a leer la conclusión de la recomendación que este comité presentó al alguacil. Como ya hemos escuchado del director de este comité, la recomendación es de cerrar Tent City. Pero en conclusión, como dice la antigua máxima legal, cuando la razón de la regla cesa, la regla misma debería de existir. Tent City se estableció para responder a la rápida demanda de camas baratas. La actitud hacia el encarcelamiento por muchos delitos ha cambiado desde 1993. Al cerrar Tent City, se puede ahorrar mucho dinero transfiriendo a todos los prisioneros a otras cárceles de MCSO. El programa de licencia de trabajo para los reclusos no sufriría los cambios a consecuencia del cierre. Es posible un ahorro considerable de recursos mediante un medio uso del personal y, esperamos, una reducción significativa de las horas extras de overtime. Dado que ya no existe razón para tener Tent City, recomendamos que se cierre y que y sus reclusos regresen al resto de las cárceles, el sistema penitenciario del condado. Para un periodo de transición necesario, habrá un periodo de transición necesario, pero no hay razón para que este cambio no pueda aprobarse ahora y implementarse con una planificación adecuada. Respetuosamente, los miembros de ese comité. Gracias.
Before I get to your questions, I do want to express my gratitude again to my Chief Deputy, Ben Henry, and my Detention Chief, Tracy Haggard, who headed up the internal review of the organization. This process will not happen overnight. Our projections are that within the first 45 to 60 days, we will move at least half of the tent population inside hardened facilities, and then it may take up to the next several months before we're able to address the issues of those on work furlough and work release who only spend partial time in that environment as we identify the most effective solution, not because of a difficulty in finding space within the hardened structures, but because of the dynamics of work furlough, their release on a constant basis, day in and day out. Those are different elements within detention that have to be effectively addressed, and there will be a process in doing so. With that, again, I thank you. I thank the men and women who over their careers have worked exceptionally hard in Tent City, do their best to address the dynamics at hand, the threats that were posed, and to run a detention center in an environment that was not conducive for that practice. I'm proud of who they are and the engagement and the opportunity I've had to communicate with them, and they were sharing their thoughts, concerns, and support for this decision. With that, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Can you go over again exactly how you're saving money here? Because wasn't it told at the beginning it's kind of a cost-saving measure to have these tents out? How are you saving money with this work?
Sure. So we will be taking the staffing that is currently assigned to tents. They'll be relocated inside. That in of itself will reduce overtime considerably. The projected number is about $4.5 million. That will be a cost savings that we will identify best options on if that is money that we should be allocating into the detention centers to improve the qualities, or if it can be a direct savings immediately, but we're going to take over time and determine that.
So the tents aren't cheaper? It's cheaper to have?
No, actually, the cost of tents per inmate has doubled since it was open, because the cost to run the facility stays the same. The staffing model has to stay the same regardless of the inmate population. But the population within our jails has dropped so considerably that we don't have that same level of revenue. But we have our staffing model stretched out over 6 facilities as opposed to 5. So in and of itself, the consolidation targets about a $4 to $4.5 million savings.
And has the number of deputies and staff that you've had in the jails declined during the same period of time, or has it remained pretty much the same?
No, the staffing model has to remain the same because of surface area, as we've been able to address because of the reduction in inmate population. Some of the tents have been closed, but overall, the operational expenses attached to it have not changed considerably.
What sort of steps do you guys have to take to actually disassemble it? I mean, are you going to, other than taking the tent apart, any demolition or anything you guys have to do to anything around there as part of disclosure?
I don't know that necessarily we need demolition. It's just going to be some, manual labor. Get out there, sweat and tears, hopefully no blood. Stay away from that.
Sheriff, what challenges do you expect to face now inside the jails, now that you're adding 700 plus more prisoners?
Well,
how are you going to deal with those?
The benefit is that our detention staff will actually be able to supplement areas where we are dealing in environments that are more controlled environments, not a spatial issue, less overtime, which means that my staff will not be exhausted. They will not be working extra shifts, longer hours. So all these factors create an environment where their health and well-being is the first priority, and their ability to manage areas. As an example, we have some pods where there are 2 detention officers responsible for over 150 inmates. Their challenge is just finding time to go to the restroom and not leaving their partner by themselves. These are things that we don't take into consideration when we roll out of bed every day and go to work. That's a reality for them.
So any downsides at all that you see?
Well, not on the surface right now. I see it as something that was unnecessary and that needed to be addressed for quite some time. Now, we work in an uncontrolled environment. We work in the most challenging profession in the United States. Nothing is perfect, and if we have to make adjustments as we go, I'll do so. This is not a decision that won't have any kind of modifications along the way, but it's a decision that's the right decision for the circumstances we're dealing with right now.
What reasons did the inmates give you that they liked it? You know, the urban legend about this for decades was it was the pits.
I can only speak to my experiences, and Mr. Woods or someone else from the Spear team can speak in more detail, but at the end of the day, being isolated in a 6x8 room, confined to a certain area, took a more substantial toll on the inmates relative to their being uncomfortable in the environment, than having the spatial freedom to move around outside. In addition, there's a day room. I think a few of you have visited the tents. You spent some time out there, right, Troy?
I spent the night. First story.
Okay. There's a day room, and the day room is climate controlled. It's an inside facility that is air conditioned in the summer and heated in the winter. Inmates only had to be in bed check 3 times a day, I believe, is the number. The rest of their day, they could spend inside in better conditions. So this misperception is no longer our story. Our story is about where we're going as an office, not where we've been.
That 4.5 million, is that?
I'll come to you in a second. All right, go ahead. You. 4.5
million, is that over a span of time? Is that over a year? And what were the operational costs, for example, in the past year?
So that's going to be an annual savings. It's a projected savings. Okay, so I'm going to tell you right now, those are the best numbers that we could look as we evaluate all factors, not knowing other expenses that could be incurred. But that would be annually, and it ran somewhere between $8 to $9 million to run 10 cities, what I was told.
Per year?
Yes, annually.
What do you plan on doing with the facility now?
The tents? Or just long term?
The space.
The space.
Well, I have some plans for it that we're not going to discuss today. I got to save you for another day to have another wonderful meeting like this.
How many staffers were at the tent city?
Overall, we had just over, I believe, 100 was the number, Chief?
It's actually 86.
86. I'm thinking of the other section
Will
included.
all of them be transitioned into other facilities? Will there be any job loss as a result?
No job losses whatsoever. When I met with staff this morning, we assured them that they would have the opportunity to put in for their top 3 choices, that we would do everything within our powers, at least for the next 60 days, to ensure that their shifts as well as their days off would not change, and that our goal was to accommodate those same shifts and days off wherever they were transferred to for another facility, so that they are not being adversely affected for their families or their own personal lives.
Do you have a timeline for when that last tent comes down?
I don't.
Months?
Could be months, yes. And I don't want to project it. And I want to make sure that we're responsible, no different than I know a lot of folks were in a hurry to have me say this to you. And I told you I wouldn't do it until it was the right decision. And when the time is right that we finally bring it all to the ground, that'll be the moment.
When did the Spirit Committee come to you with this recommendation, and when did you make the decision?
Last week is when they gave me their report, but as I said, I have been doing my own review since taking office. So their review was one to just see if there were any discrepancies, concerns, or issues. And if everything was in alignment, I had already recognized through the counsel of my staff and our own research what was the best decision for the circumstances.
So when did you make the decision?
When did I make the decision?
Yeah.
Talk to you right now about it. I made the decision. I was confident in the decision. I chose now to present it to you. I can't give you an exact moment when I said, okay, I'm closing it. It was a progression to get to this point.
Was it in response to the Puente announcement that there was going to be?
Absolutely not. Let me be very, very clear. No outside influences who truly don't have insight to the operations of the organization, the understanding of the dynamics of what the detention officers deal with, what we deal with in leadership, economical factors, everything at play. People can share their thoughts, their opinions, their concerns, and I'll take those in consideration. But under no circumstances is an outside influence going to influence my decision if it's not in the best interest of the public that I serve, and that means everyone, no one particular group.
Did you give former Sheriff Joe Arpaio a heads up before making this decision?
No.
Did politics play a role? I mean, there's probably no more visible way to say literally there's a new sheriff in town than shutting down Tent City.
Absolutely not, because I'm supremely confident, no different than other things I've dealt with. There are going to be folks on both sides of politics who will criticize and scrutinize this decision. At the end of the day, I go home, I look in the mirror and make sure that I was true to my ethics and my integrity, the office that I've been empowered to run, and politics has no place in this office. If there's a day where the sheriff's office is a non-political position, probably be in the best interest of our entire community.
Sheriff, when did the changes start?
The changes will take place, as I stated, over the next 60 days, 45 to 60 days. We will transition inmates into the secured facilities, and the staffing will be adjusted at that time. You're not going to show up there tomorrow and see a considerable change. It'll be a progression because, again, we have to respect and work with shift changes and other factors on behalf of our staff.
And in terms of those inmates being transferred into those other detention centers, do you know how many are going to go into the various other 5 jails that you guys have?
My chief of detention does, and she can get you that information later, after we're done with some of these other issues. But it's going to be wherever they're best suited, where populations make sense. There's a lot of factors such as classifications, in addition to space, that are taken into consideration as we go through this process. But these are things that have all been researched before I stood here in front of you today.
Your predecessor had the occasion to shut down Mesa jail that was run by the county. Are you going to be reopening that?
Outside the scope of what we're discussing today, right now we're taking one thing on at a time.
Are there going to be any challenges getting those lower level offenders that were part of Tent City, and any concerns about mingling them with the tougher, more hardened criminals?
Everything we do is challenging. And no, we don't mix lower classifications with higher classifications when it comes to the threat and the safety of inmates. So the spaces that they will be assigned to will be spaces consistent with others in the same classification.
Sheriff, in light of recent criminal investigations of your former detention chief, how confident of you are that your other chiefs and lieutenants are going to be showing up and working the amount of hours they are required to?
I am 100% confident. I think that's a nonsensical question for me right now, and I apologize for saying that to you, but the staff that I've selected is an entirely new staff. Accountability is one of the most important priorities in our executive staff, oversight and accountability. Those things that went on in the past are not reflective of who I am or what I stand for as a leader, nor are they reflective of the men and women that you see standing next to me today. But if there is a deficiency, if there is a failure, if there is a violation, which occur in every industry, we'll address them accordingly.
Sheriff, do you know if anybody ever escaped from Tent City, or if anybody ever died there while it was operating?
I know that we didn't have any no deaths.
We've had escapes.
There was an escape.
One escape?
I don't know the number, but there have been. And again, those are things that you can speak with my detention chief about after.
There's been allusions to misconceptions about Tent City over the years. What is the message now that you project to people outside by closing Tent City once and for all?
I'm not sure I totally understand your question, but I'll do my best to answer it. The message is this. This organization will represent what is greatest about law enforcement and detention. Our decisions will be well thought out. They'll be efficient, they'll be effective, and they'll serve the best interests of the community that we serve. We will respect the authority we've been given, and base our practices off of public service. There is no place for anything in this organization that either misdirects, misappropriates, or deceives the public that we serve. We will be fundamentally sound in everything we do, and that means being financially efficient, because every dollar that's wasted undermines the safety of my detention officers and my deputies and undermines the safety of this community. Therefore, if we're not making these decisions that are in the best interest of financial elements, then we can't run an efficient, effective organization.
One more question.
Wow, you almost intimidated everybody.
What's next on tap for Spear?
What's next on tap for Spear? I'm going to give them a unpaid vacation for at least the next week or two. We don't have anything immediately. What I don't want to do is treat this board, who's been kind enough to give us their time and their expertise, in some manner where we're calling on them for everything and anything. I will call on them when I feel it is an element that requires outside perspective, expertise, and other elements to help us to get to the right decision. So when I do have a new project for them, I'll be sure and let you guys know.
They stay in place as an advisory.
As long as they like to. They're doing a phenomenal job. Thank you guys for your time, for everything that you do. I appreciate it. I think there's going to be some folks sticking around for other questions. I'm going to move on to my next project, though. Thank you.